Tonight, we discussed self-defense, how it applies in terms of childbirth, euthanasia, driving, abortion, the ultimate value of human life.
We're going to be talking tonight about a very certain specific set of laws. It's just we never actually happened to talk about them in all our years of study. And I was like, oh, we should really discuss these as well, which have like a few possible relevant perspectives. And of course, a lot of it might not seem relevant, but there's a certain perspective on life that we're going to be discussing. So this is one of the subsets of laws under thou shalt not murder. So of course, thou shalt not murder is one of the 7 Noahide laws, under which there's a whole chapter here dedicated to the laws of a pursuer and self-defense. A pursuer means if someone is chasing another person with the intent to kill them, then they're called a pursuer. And at that point, there's a concept in law of self-defense, which is if someone is coming to kill you, then you have not only the ability, the right, what you should do is, if the only way to stop them is kill them first, then you kill them first. If someone's coming to kill you, you stand up and kill them first. And that's considered your self-defense. So this is under the laws of murder. Within it, this very specific subcategory. And you could say, well, thank God that doesn't usually happen in my neighborhood, not on Mondays or Thursdays or ever. So these laws are completely irrelevant. But I did see in it a few applications that actually might be relevant, as well as, of course, as I'm saying, the overarching concept here, which is the tremendous value of human life. And since life is so valuable, if someone is pursuing to take away life, then not only the person being pursued, but anyone else that sees has an obligation to do whatever they can to stop this want-to-be murder. Of course, our first goal isn't to stop the murderer by murdering him, but if that's the only way we can stop this person from murdering someone else, anyone who's around, who is aware of what's going on, has an obligation to do whatever they can, including to kill the pursuer, to prevent this murder from happening. I remember once hearing how in New York City or something, somebody was chasing a woman and she was running and in city streets, apartment buildings, everyone's around hearing her. And she's saying, help, 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 for blocks and blocks and blocks. And no one did a thing. A very sad testimony to the lack of adherence to these laws. If someone is in trouble, if someone is asking for help, if someone is trying to hurt someone else, then we have an obligation to get involved. It's not like it's not my problem, I don't know them. I had this once, and again, I would not expect it in my neighborhood either. I remember this very clearly. It was Saturday night, and I was taking out the garbage alley, and I see a man literally running for his life. And as I'm there, he just sort of says, call the cops. And I saw someone behind him. And I went in my house and I called, reported what I heard. I mean, I see somebody and someone's chasing him, and it looks like it's serious. So obviously, whatever we can do, we need to do in such a situation. Of the general overarching perspective, people getting involved, try to stop a murderer, a pursuer, is part of what's called a civilized world. Whereas if we're in a civilized world, murder is not acceptable. Murder does not happen. So what creates such an environment when no one allows? So if everyone is aware of this, if everyone is focused, if everyone says, yes, we do not condone this, we do not allow this, we're going to stop you. We don't know the person you're pursuing. We don't know you. It's not our problem. It's not our issue. It doesn't make a difference. It's human life. And if this is a civilized world, civilized people do what they can to protect human life. And that's the underpinnings of this concept that has many laws, and I'm not going to go through all of them. I just picked out a few. Another example where this could be applicable is the idea of blackmail. If someone says to a person, you have to do whatever, and if you don't do it, I'm going to kill you, which is what we would call a blackmailer. That blackmailer, even though he's not pointing a gun at you at this moment, you're sitting in an office, he's talking to you over the phone, he's considered a pursuer. He's considered someone who is trying to kill you, potentially. You're never supposed to listen to a blackmailer. But according to these laws, if the only way to stop the blackmailer was killing him, you'd be allowed to, which might sound extreme. Well, he doesn't have a gun to you now, but we know that's his intention. We know he's clearly saying, if you don't do this prohibited act that I'm telling you to do, I'm going to kill you. And he's trying to kill you. And then we have to behave exactly at that point. Now, this also comes up in terms of childbirth. If a woman, who's the pursuer here? So sometimes the question is the fetus a pursuer of the woman's life? And that is an application that still applies in our world, where hopefully we don't see people chasing people to kill them, though I did share my experience, but hopefully that's not something we're going to see. But this is something that could potentially happen in any childbirth situation. So there's a number of laws. They're very, very, very specific, but they all should make perfect sense because they're all based on the same concept of the value of human life. If a woman is at risk of dying in childbirth due to the fetus, it is permissible to kill unborn fetus to save the mother's life. Again, I'm being very, very specific. The fetus is not yet born, still completely inside the womb. And the doctors are saying, if this child is born, the mother will die. In that case, the fetus is considered like the pursuer of this woman, and therefore it is permissible. And what you need to do in that situation is to kill the fetus to save the mother's life. But if the fetus is in the process of emerging, if the head has already come out, at that point, you do not have the ability, it's not allowed to kill the fetus to save the mother, because as our sages say, who's to say which blood is redder? In other words, the mother is a person, the fetus at this point is a person, the head has already emerged. So who's to say who's the pursuer of who? Who's to say who's killing who? So if the child has not at all yet emerged, it's not really considered a living person the same way the mother is. And therefore, there will be permission, again, if this is the only way of saving the life of the mother, won't be allowed to take away the life of the child, of the fetus. But once the head has emerged, we're not allowed to make that choice. We're not allowed to choose one life over another. Now, it's very interesting because there was a footnote here that I thought was fascinating, which said what people call a DNX, partial birth abortion, which literally that stands for, if any of you ever wondered, intact dilation and extraction of the fetus is only permitted if it's medically the only way to save the mother. So very often, these procedures are done with doctors claiming it's the only choice to save the mother's life is to take away the life of the child, and her life comes first, and we have to do it. That's called a DNX, as it's usually referred to. So very interesting footnote here. This was a study in 1996 from the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And they said that there's no such situation. Very strange, because this is a common practice, definitely done in America. And they said they had a panel on this. They convened in their convention by the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists. And they said there's no circumstance where the only option to save the mother is to kill the fetus. So what would happen if a doctor advised or mandated, said as a fact, well, the mother's life is in danger, and therefore you have to remove the fetus because the mother's life is in danger. And the person did so. And then afterwards they realized, oops, she could have done this. We actually could have done this. That's maybe a little more involved procedure, whatever, reasons why we weren't thinking of doing it, but actually that could also have worked. Then that removal of the fetus is considered murder. Meaning if truly the fetus is not yet born and the mother's life is at risk, and this is the only way to save the mother's life, it's permissible and it's not murder. It's considered literally a subcategory of this concept of the pursuer. But if there's any other way to save the life of the mother, it's absolutely forbidden and is considered murder. It's considered murder of that fetus. So if a doctor ever makes such a statement, obviously a person has to really not just blindly trust the doctor, as I think over the last years we've learned to not blindly trust doctors, and has to really get another opinion, get a more expert opinion, see if there's any other alternatives. Because if there's no other alternative, it is permissible. But if there's any other alternative, it's murder. Very, very significant application of this concept of if there's a pursuer, you're allowed to kill the pursuer to save the victim, but only if that's the only thing you can do. We said category 1, situation 1, there's no other medical way to save the mother's life and the mother will die and the fetus is not born. You're allowed to take the life of the fetus to save the mother. Situation 2, the head of the fetus has already emerged. The doctors are saying, well, gotta take away the fetus to save the mother's life. We're told you choose which life to save. Can't do anything. Now there's a third situation. In the third situation, if when the fetus head has already emerged, but it's clear that if the fetus is allowed to have a birth, both the mother and the fetus will die, or whatever happens to the mother, the fetus for sure is going to die, or the fetus is for sure is a stillborn, then at that point you could abort the fetus, even though the head has emerged. So again, the reasons why in that case you're allowed to abort the fetus, which normally you'd not be allowed to once the head has emerged, even if the doctors say, well, if the child is born, the mother's going to die. So if the child is born, the mother's going to die, and the child's head has already emerged, we're like, we can't choose one life over another life. We can't play God here. This is a life and this is a life. It's not for us to choose. There's nothing we're allowed to do. But in this other situation, in situation 3, the difference here is it's not if the child is born, the mother will die. It's if the child is allowed to be born, both will die. Or the child is going to be born a stillborn. We see that already. If the child is a stillborn and the mother's going to die. Or if the mother dies or not, the child for sure is going to die. So in all of those 3 options, the death of the child was inevitable. The child's going to die with the mother, or the child's going to die if the mother dies or not, or the child is a stillborn. So in any of those cases, you would be allowed to abort the fetus to save the mother because already the life of the child is not going to happen. So you're not choosing the mother's life over the child's life. Unfortunately, in that situation, the child's not going to live already. That's already a given. So if this could then save the mother's life, it would again, going back to these laws, be allowed. But in a case where they both, it's one or the other, it's not for us to pick which one. If you would see 2 people, now moving away from this, if you would see 2 people trying to kill each other, it's permissible to, again, you would sort of have to make this judgment call on who's the pursuer here, but the one who seems to be the pursuer to help who you're assuming is a victim, save his life from the pursuer, which has certain modern day application. If you would see someone, again, you might never see this, but I think it just shows you, unfortunately, because we know there's the idea of modern day slavery nowadays, unfortunately. And it's another application of this law is if you would see someone pursuing someone, not to kill them, to make them a slave, that is considered, again, that you can do anything to save that person, even to taking the life of the pursuer. Now, where this hopefully wouldn't, but who knows, in our world might pan out, is if a person saw something that made them realize that, well, let's say they're on a plane and they see a child, actually a boy or a girl, next to a man, and they realize something seems weird there. Something seems, the way that child is reacting, or the way that maybe teenager is acting, it doesn't seem like a normal situation. Again, we have an obligation to try to do something about it. I'm just giving this like unfortunate example, like on a plane, an international flight coming into America or leaving America, it would mean going over to someone on the staff and just saying, this is what I see. I don't know, but I'm just telling you, if you could please have authorities ready when the plane lands. I don't know if this is a legitimate situation or not. But again, I don't know them. What's it my business? Don't want to get involved. No, a Noahide gets involved. a Noahide feels a sense of responsibility for the civilization around him, that civilization should be moral. So just as if, God forbid, someone is trying to kill them, as a Noahide, you do whatever you can to save this life if you do or don't know the people involved. If it seems that someone is doing something to sell another person, to make a slave out of another person, which again, unfortunately does happen in this world, and you have any peripheral awareness, a Noahide has to do whatever they can to get involved and save the situation. And that's literally considered like a pursuer for murder, a pursuer for slavery, a pursuer for murder. It's put in basically the same category. And there's a whole concept in terms of a robbery, which I don't know if these are the laws in wherever you live in America, but from a Torah perspective, if a person is coming secretively to rob you, the assumption is that if you try to stop them, they'll kill you. In which case, they're a pursuer. In which case, if you hear them, are aware there's a robber in the house, according from a Torah perspective, you would have a right to kill that robber to save your life, because if he sees you, he would kill you. Now, obviously, one has to use common sense, meaning if you would see a child, you hear noises and you realize someone broke into your house, and you look and you see it's an 11-year-old child who's coming to steal, most of the time you would assume, well, this child's not coming to murder. Child would murder. They steal, it's bad enough. He's not a murderer. So if he's not a potential murderer, then obviously you have no right to kill him. If you see it's the example given classically, if it's your father, you hear some noises and you sneak around, peek, and you see it's your father who came to rob you, the assumption is in any normative situation, even if your father's coming to rob you, he wouldn't murder you. So therefore, obviously, you have no right to murder him, to protect yourself from being robbed from him. The perspective here again would this person really murder? It's a robber who would murder if that's the type of robberies that are done. And if you know that's the type of people that rob in your area, in your city, in this time, and someone is in the middle of robbing you, then you definitely can, as self-protection, murder them, because it's not considered murder. It's considered self-defense. Even if you could say, no, I could just stay in my room and maybe they'll never come to my room, but maybe they will. Or maybe they'll come into a child's room. You don't know. And therefore, it's a situation of someone who's coming to kill you, and therefore you have the right to kill them. Another application, which again, hopefully should never, ever, ever happen to anyone, as I sincerely hope all of these applications should just be theoretical knowledge, and we walk away from this with an awareness of the value of life, and therefore our responsibility to defend life, both if it's our own life or if it's someone else's life that we can defend. And none of these have any practical application, which maybe is why I never taught this chapter. But another application that's being brought, and I'll explain the backstory, meaning the laws behind it, and then see the application. The law behind this is, even if someone is a little bit complicated, pursuing unintentionally, but is still considered pursuing, and you would die because of this pursuit, then you're not just, I'm allowed to, your obligation at that point would be to kill the person who is pursuing you, even though they're pursuing you unintentionally. And we try to explain what that could mean. Meaning, a pursuer normally is someone coming to kill you. It means pursuing you. They're pursuing to kill, or as we said, pursuing to enslave, pursuing to harm in a very violent way another person, also be equivalent. So to save one's life, you can defend yourself, even if it means killing the other person, if you have no other way of defending yourself. And if any bystander is there, also, again, it's not like our first go-to is to kill a person. But if there's no other way to save the life of the victim, even that could be. Here we're saying, what if someone doesn't realize they're pursuing you? They don't mean to pursue you. They're not a violent person. They're not mad at you. They're not trying to hurt you. But the action they're doing would cause your death. If that's the case, they are viewed just like a person who is deliberately doing it. Now, where does this apply? So the example in our world, which again, God forbid should ever happen to anyone, is if a person is driving, a pedestrian suddenly walks right in front of them. Now, what is the situation? Well, it depends on a lot of the details around this story. But let's say it's a highway with fast moving cars, full. It's a busy time and there are lots of cars and it's a busy highway and there's no way to come to a stop. There's no way to turn to the right. There's no way to turn to the left. There's nothing you can do but keep going straight. And if you try to stop, it's for sure a serious accident. For sure, there will be a fatal accident. No question. Now, this person suddenly decides to walk across such a highway. He's right in front of you. What do? Well, I mean, God forbid, nobody should ever be in that situation to think, what do? And you probably don't have time to think what you do. But the law is, this is the law. And again, nobody should ever be in a situation to ever need this law. But if it's guaranteed that a fatal accident would occur if you try to brake for the person, we're told you don't brake for the person. That person is considered a pursuer, an unwitting pursuer. He doesn't know you. He's not trying to kill you, but his actions would cause your death. But of course, this only applies in the type of situation of a fast moving highway where you literally can't switch lane. Like, it's impossible. You can't switch here. You can't switch here. You can't. I mean, that type of situation. I'm sure we've all been in such highways. If we don't know what's going on in this person's head. Sometimes you think it is a person trying to suicide. Suddenly a person walks across the highway, but it's not as busy a time. You can switch lanes. You can veer around the person. You could even brake. You see, there's no one behind you. You could brake for a few seconds. You can quickly go to the side side of the road. You could just go over to the next lane where it's no traffic. Then obviously in that case, there's no concept of, well, I mean, you're not supposed to stop. No, obviously here, if you have any ability to not harm the person, of course you have to do it. And of course, that's your obligation and responsibility. So the first scenario is only if literally you have no choice and it's doing something that will cause a fatal accident or keep moving, which would also be horrible. But if you have any ability to stop, to swerve, to switch lanes, then obviously, even if the only way you can save this pedestrian's life is by crashing your car, which will destroy your car and you will be injured, but it's not a fatal injury, then obviously that's your obligation. So it's only in a situation where there's no choice. It's going to be a fatal accident that way or that way, that we're told, well, this person's a pursuer. But again, if a person's driving and there's a pedestrian, and the only way you can not move forward to that pedestrian is creating an accident, but not a fatal accident, you still have to create that accident. As long as you know it's not going to be fatal, crash your car, injure yourself, we value human life. The previous situation was only where there was no chance, it was for sure going to be a fatal accident. Now, another situation, a variation on this theme, which again is just, again, these things are all theoretical and none of us will ever even know anyone that was in any of these situations. Another situation would be, what if you're driving a vehicle in a place where a pedestrian is allowed to walk, equal rights? Like if you're driving an off-road vehicle, an off-road motorcycle, a snowmobile in a wilderness area, you're allowed legally to drive there. And the pedestrian is allowed legally to walk there. And suddenly there's a pedestrian. At that point, you have no right to keep going to the pedestrian, even if you would have to sacrifice your own life to avoid the collision, because the pedestrian is not a pursuer. In other words, again, this is also to understand how we look at life. The phrase the sages use is, who says your blood is redder than his? So in the previous two examples, with the driver and the pedestrian, it's a highway and some person bent on suicide. We don't know why. Suddenly he's walking in the middle of an intense highway. He's the pursuer. He's doing something that's not allowed, that's creating this situation that someone's going to die. And therefore, since he's the pursuer there, If you have no choice, you keep moving. And if you have any choice in the world, including crashing your car and including being injured in the process, as long as it's not fatal, that's what you have to do. But if it's a situation where this person cannot be called a pursuer, he's walking in an area where you're allowed to walk. You are driving also in that area and you're allowed to drive there, but he's allowed to walk there the same way you're allowed to drive there. And suddenly he's in your path. Then whatever it takes to brake, you have to do, no matter, God forbid, what damage you could have and the vehicle could have. It doesn't make a difference. You can't say, well, I'm going to get hurt. I could get very hurt. My vehicle will be totally destroyed. It doesn't make a difference. Your blood is redder than his. This person's not a pursuer. He's allowed to walk here. So if he's not a pursuer, then you can't have that calculation. Well, if I try to stop, there'll be a fatal accident of me. Doesn't make a difference. Your blood is not redder than his. That would be the same concept, what I mentioned before. If someone is blackmailing a person, or there's, God forbid, a situation, which of course should never be in our world, but unfortunately in the past, there have been such situations where a person is told, you have to kill so-and-so or I'm going to kill you. I need you to kill so-and-so. And if you don't kill so-and-so, I'm going to kill you. And you know the person's going to kill you. And you know you have no way of defending yourself and killing this other person. So you know if you don't kill this other person, you're going to get killed. Are you allowed to kill the other person to save your own life? Absolutely not. Totally forbidden. But he's going to kill you. He's going to kill you. That's, you can't prevent. That doesn't give you permission to take someone else's life. And that's, again, the concept of, is your blood redder than his? This even goes so far, and unfortunately the Jews had this situation as recently as the Holocaust, and many times before that. Like, for example, the Nazis said to the Jews, we need you to turn over this and this and this person, and we know they're hiding in your city, in the ghetto, in the wherever, and if you don't turn them over, we're going to kill all these people, or we're going to kill 10 of the people, or we're going to randomly pick 10 people if you don't turn over this person. You're not allowed to turn them over. It's forbidden. It says your blood is redder than his. You're not allowed to save another life by giving over that life. So we very, very, very much value life. And that's why in all of these situations where we're saying for self-defense, if someone's trying to kill you, you can kill them if you have to, if there's no other way of saving your life. Or to defend someone that you see a potential victim who person is trying to kill, you could do anything to stop, including take their life. It's only because we so value life. That's the reason behind these words. That's the reason behind this. Another example, again, unfortunately in our world, is within the concept of euthanasia. If a sick person is actively requesting to be killed, they want to alleviate their physical suffering, they just don't want to deal with this illness anymore, they want to die. They are asking to be killed. They're asking to die. Stop all my life support system. I don't want to live. Give me an injection. I don't want to live. My whole life is just going to be illness. I'm never going to recover. I'm never going to come back to being a functioning person. I don't want this life. This life is not life. I want to die. Now, if you're in a situation when someone was telling you that, it is forbidden for you to listen to them. It doesn't make a difference if they're your parent, if they're your spouse that's telling you, God forbid, in any situation. But if anyone is asking you to take their life because they're sick and they don't want to live like this, it is forbidden to take their life. Again, we value life. Life is priceless. Every day of life is priceless. Every breath of life is priceless. We never, ever, ever take away someone's life. But if another person that has a different set of morals than yours goes to do this and is going to unplug the person or give them an injection or whatever they're going to do, this would not be considered someone who's a pursuer. And you're like, well, I can do anything in the world to stop them because I learned all these laws. And a pursuer, you can do anything if they're trying to kill another person. You can even take away their life. And here, this person is clearly a pursuer. They're trying to kill this person. a person that's asking to die and someone is acquiescing to their request, even though it's totally forbidden, it's totally not allowed to do that, but that other person is not considered a pursuer. And therefore, obviously, you as the bystander cannot harm the other person to prevent him from doing this euthanasia act. So in other words, it's sort of like how Torah would view it is, if someone tried to kill the person performing euthanasia, he's a murderer. The person who performs euthanasia is also considered a murderer. They're both considered murderers. Well, if he's considered a murderer, so shouldn't I stop him? If he does euthanasia, he's a murderer, but he's not a pursuer. He's a murderer, but he's not a pursuer. And you're only allowed to stop a pursuer. So for you to do the act of euthanasia would be murder. For him to do the act of euthanasia will be considered murder, but he's not a pursuer because the person's asking for it. And therefore, you have no ability to harm him to stop the act. Again, just understanding the nuances of the thought here in terms of what does it mean a pursuer, what does it mean self-defense, and what does it mean to help someone that you see in this situation. So anyone can apply any of these ideas, and obviously I hope nothing I said should be applicable in anyone's world. I sincerely hope so. But the morals, the concepts, the value of life, any of this you can see as relevant in your world, that things happened in the past are happening currently or could happen in the future, that you could see relevant these concepts.
I'm going to ask a simple question. How does this relate to animals, or is this just strictly humans?
You're saying if someone was trying to kill an animal?
Yeah, I mean, all of these examples.
If there was a deer going in the road, for example?
Yeah,
100%. No, that's no question. If there's an animal in the road, and then I thank you for bringing it up, that's 100, that's not nothing to do. That's not human life. If there's an animal, so I mean, a realistic example in certain country roads, I actually know certain situations, is if there's deers. I know certain areas of the country, like in upstate New York, where there are deers on the road. And a deer is actually a very big animal. And if there was a deer on the road and you cannot swerve around it. Now, again, we're told also hitting the deer could also cause tremendous damage and perhaps fatal injury to the passengers.
Yeah.
But if it's so, therefore, just protect yourselves. You really don't want to hit the deer because the deer is actually a very powerful, strong animal. And unfortunately, I even remember a case where someone perished in that situation where deer suddenly came on the road. So it's not a simple thing to hit the deer as like, no big deal, I'll hit the deer and save my life. It's something you really want to avoid because it might not save your life. But if you're in one of these windy country roads where you're going too fast and there's no way to swerve out of the deer's way or a smaller animal's way, we're told no. Human life definitely has precedence over animal life, no question. In any situation, whatever the situation is, human life has precedence over animal life. Even if the animal is your animal and the human you don't know, but your animal and a human you don't know, human life always takes precedence over animal life.
So there's a person, let's say, on my land who I know is there to, I don't know, shoot my whatever animal because he wants to take it and eat it. Or you couldn't hurt him to prevent, or kill him, to prevent him from killing your animals.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely not. You can call the police, you can get better fences, you can pen your animals, but you cannot hurt him to prevent him from hurting your animals. The only question would be, again, would he be considered a robber that if he's caught would hurt you? But if he sees you coming, if he's going to run away, then no. Then you have no ability to hurt him to protect your animals. Absolutely not. Great question. Christelle, what were you going to say?
Sorry about that. I don't usually use earpieces, and wasn't
now
working.
You know why.
yes, it's a challenge. But no, I was just saying, I'm so thankful. But I have been in one of those situations where you can't do anything else but drive. I was on a backcountry road, and it was like there was people behind me, there was people coming, and a turkey buzzard came up out of the ditch and just flew right in front of me. And it was like, had I braked, then I would have caused wrecks I couldn't swerve. I mean, so it was just go through it. But I mean, that was scary enough with a turkey buzzard. So I'm very thankful it wasn't a human.
And that must have been very traumatic.
I asked a question in the chat. I don't want to say it out loud right now because I'm not in a private space, but you
Sure.
wouldn't mind
I
to
will
read it.
respond to that question. You do, in that situation, if you know someone is trying to terminate a pregnancy, yes, you're supposed to do anything above and beyond you can to save that life. Once already the person has been pregnant for 72 hours. Once it's already 72 hours into the pregnancy, then it's a life. And it's actually a very horrible thing. Don't think it's a culture here, but I happen to know a lot of women from Russia, Jewish women that left Russia. And in Russia, abortion was basically their birth control. And therefore it was just it sounds crazy, but that was just the norm of birth control. And yes, 100% from 72 hours, it's a life. It's an absolute life, and we do whatever we can. Whatever we can could mean seeing if you can help support them through it, helping connect them to social services. There's so many people that are so desperate to adopt a child. There's so many, they'll give them money for the duration of the pregnancy, take care of all their needs. There's so many, again, you don't know the reason why the person wants to terminate the pregnancy. But unfortunately, I'm saying like for young single girls, a lot of times if someone really gets involved and really shows their support, then they'll have the baby. So that's definitely an example of a Noahide's obligation to get involved. And for a lot of people, it's a sense of like, I don't know these people. I don't know any teenage girl. I know, like, not my world, not my issue, not my problem. But we're told to no, I can't have that perspective. I know in Chicago, I mean, this is a slightly different angle on this whole thing, but in Chicago now they have this whole like campaign. They've had it for a few years already to reach out in the schools to give girls this information that if you have a baby and you don't want that baby, drop it off. No questions asked. Any library, hospital, fire station, police station, no one's going to ask you your name. No one's going to ask you anything. Just give them the baby. And it's a horrible thing to think why they had to come to this point. And it's literally because these girls don't even know what to do and suddenly have a baby and put them in garbages. So yes, it's a very, 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 it's murder. Murder in the abortion and obviously murder at that point. And therefore, anything, if you know anyone in that situation, for whatever reason, it's really important to not say, it's not my business. I don't want to be offensive. Who am I to get involved? Especially if it's not a teenage girl. This is an adult, be so rude. I don't want to be rude. There's a life at stake. If there's a life at stake, you can risk being rude. And you get involved and you speak to the person that this is a life. This is a life. And then discuss what options are there that could help you, continue this life until the child is born.
So I had two thoughts on this one, because the first part where you're talking about the logistics of childbirth, if anybody's ever studied like medieval deliveries and maternal fetal medicine, a lot of that sounds like what they were actively dealing with, which was horrifying and also fascinating, all the things that, thank God, we, for the most part, don't have to deal with anymore. My oldest, they're behind me making faces. Let's just say that, 100 years ago, he and I both wouldn't be here from the way that things were going with him. So it's like very, very thankful that that was not the case, that we have the medicine that we do. But at the same time, I'm thinking where you're talking about, like, if there's this turkey right behind me, if there's a case where they know for sure, right, that it would put the mother's life at risk. That one always makes me wonder, because there are these like fringe in some cases, miraculous cases. Like the one that to me always comes to mind is like, you know, if the embryo gets implanted like in the fallopian tube, right? And it would be definitely fatal to the mother to let it go past. But there actually is at least one documented case of a embryo implanting outside the uterus, and the mother was actually able to bring this baby as close to term as they could get it. And but it was very, I mean, because it was too late once they figured out that that was what was going on. It was several weeks, months down the line, and so they were able to bring this baby to term. So I always struggle with that one, like how do they know for sure? Do you know what I mean? Because in
So
that
that's
case,
what
like,
I quoted that
so wild.
study that I thought was so interesting, that they are saying, this was in, I think it was 96, I said, that they said there's no such situation, which is very interesting for the doctors who are the ones that say you have no choice. So in a council for these doctors to say there's no such situation, like there's always something you can do medically to save the life of the mother besides aborting the child. You're muted. If you're talking to us, you're muted. You're not talking to us. Ruth, did you have something you were going to share?
No, I'm just listening. I think it's very clear. I mean, what the procedures are clear to how to follow those situations. So, and I'm hoping I never be involved in one of them.
All of us hope that. It's very interesting what Christelle said about having no choice driving, where she exactly understands what it means having no choice, because she was in that situation. So thank God it was an animal and not a human. And thank God it wasn't an animal that she was fatally injured by.
Right.
Versus the deer situation where it could be. It actually reminded me of a story of an incident that happened in New Jersey, where this man was involved. It wasn't, I don't know if it was a pedestrian or not, but he was involved in a certain accident where someone else died. And I don't remember if the person was a pedestrian and died, or if the other person was in a car, but an elderly man died. And it was totally no fault of his, and he was totally exonerated. He was totally 100% not his fault. But he felt horrible. He felt horrible to think that he caused the death of someone, even though, again, from Torah law and from secular law, he was completely innocent. But still, you don't want to be the reason for someone to die, even though you're completely innocent. Anyway, in this story, what happened actually was he then realized a step further in the strangeness of the situation, that this person that was involved in this car accident and who he, so to speak, killed, was a previous owner of the house he had bought. Obviously, I totally didn't realize this when they were in this accident, but it was actually the previous owner of his house was this person that he killed in this car accident, which was like sort of creepier. Like, oh my gosh, it's actually someone I, so to speak, sort of know. I'm living, bought his house. And then the final piece came together when they were cleaning out some back room in the basement or some closet or something like that. And they found all this Nazi paraphernalia. And they found out that this man that they bought the house from was actually a Nazi that had escaped Germany after the war, settled in America, in New Jersey. And that was the person that died in that car accident. And then he felt like, oh, wow, okay. Wasn't that God used me as a tool to take away an innocent person's life? It was that God used me as a tool to take away this Nazi's life. And that was his takeaway in that situation. Which, of course, is not usually the case, that we have any understanding of why would God put me in a situation to take life, even as Danielle said, an animal's life. And none of us will want to do that either, obviously. None of us want to ever be in that situation. That's why I said to Christelle, I'm sure it was very traumatic, her story. No one would ever want to be in that situation. But we always have to remember that there's a God at work. And whatever situation we're in, God is the one orchestrating the situation. And if we're a good person trying to lead a good life, and God puts something like that in our path, and there's nothing we can do about it, there's a reason why God's doing it. And we just have to trust that, like in everything else in our world, he knows what he's doing. Okay. Thank you so much for joining. And we should have a great week. And obviously, as we said, never want to apply for ourselves any of these situations, but definitely to have a heightened awareness that we have responsibility for the world around us. And like, the example Danielle gave of someone who's pregnant and contemplating or convinced, determined to have an abortion would be a perfect example in our world of someone's trying to take away someone's life and you're a bystander and you have to do anything you can to save that situation and not worry about how you're going to be viewed. Thank you so much. Have a great week.